Samuel chapter 5. Oh, he's already got it. And David came to Baal-perazim, and David smote them there and said, the Lord hath broken forth upon my enemies and before me in the breach of waters. Therefore he called the name of that place. Somebody say it. I just want to hear you all. You all laughing at me when I say it. Go to the next one, verse 21. And the Philistines came up yet again. Somebody say that, came again. David just had success, and they came again. What's the first thing in the natural we would do? Obviously, what we did the first time to get success in the first place. Anybody say that? Amen. Or are you going to leave me up here all alone like I'm the only one talking? Naturally, we would want to jump in and say, you know what? It worked last time. Let's try it this time. Verse 24. I'm sorry, I tricked you up there. And when David inquired of the Lord, he said, thou shalt not go up, but fetch a compass behind them and come up on them against the mulberry trees. Watch this. And let it be when thou hearest the sound, somebody say sound, of the going in the tops of the mulberry trees, that thou shalt bestir thyself, for then shall the Lord go out before thee to smite the host of the Philistines. Verse 25, my favorite part of the whole verse. And David did so. That's all I really need to say. David did so. I'm not just talking about my other Mr. Clean brother from another mother sitting behind me, David. I'm talking about David obeyed God. But the whole point was to the process is that God said, I want to do something new in you. Yeah. Have you ever noticed that God changes often so that we don't get hooked upon how God does it by the simple fact that God is doing it? And it would be very easy to think we could fill these seats and get revival, get everything sparked back, doing what we did 10 years ago. It would be great if that would work because we've got videos of how we did it. We keep archives of everything. It would be so very easy. But God said, David, what you did then to get success will not work now. I want you to do it a different way. That is such a sermon in itself. But then he said, I want you to go to a place where mulberry trees grow. And he said, I want you to wait until you hear a sound. Somebody say sound. I got to quit after this. This is all I'm giving you because I won't have anything for next week. He said, go to a place where you hear a sound. And when you hear the sound, it will be a signal that I'm going before you and I will work out the situation. And David did so. Somebody say sound. Do you know why sound is so very important? Sound precedes the move of God. Why do we have praise and worship? It's not just because we like music. But it's a simple fact that sound always, you don't believe me? The book of Genesis, God said with a sound, let there be, and there was, right? When you get on the airplane, before you ever start moving, you hear the rustling of a sound. Anybody hearing me in this place? You hear the sound. Goes in a movie. Did you know they set the stage before anything happens with sound? You see a woman walking down the road, and all of a sudden you hear party music. You know she's going to the party. But if that same woman's walking down the same road and you hear you think it's the next installment of Nightmare on Elm Street because it sets the mood. It sets direction. Somebody say sound. Why is sound important when we're talking about generations? I know you're not going to like me when I say it, but it's all right. I'm going to let you go after this one. You can talk about me in the car on the way home. Somebody say sound. Every generation has its own sound. Every generation. The 1950s had something in birth called rock and roll for a man named Elvis Presley who swung his hips, and through his influence birthed a man named Mr. Checker who learned how to do the twist. Anybody from the time? Am I telling the truth? The 1960s, we had this thing called the British invasion with the Beatles where everybody started getting these shaggy dog haircuts and dressing like Sergeant Pepper. Anybody had that? Okay, you're going to show me any love at all. So then we see that there's a group of people that rebelled through the 70s that said, you know what? We live in the South, so we're not going to shave, and we're going to start a band called Leonard Skinner. And then the people in the city said, we're not from the South, so there's this band called the Bee Gees that we can have this whole polyester revival and wear all of our chest hair showing out and have more gold than Mr. T and dance to doing some disco. Is anybody in the place at all? It comes to the 80s and all the stuff in the 70s had been overdone so much that the men got confused and started wearing all kinds of hairspray and spandex and eyeshadow. And we see people like Bon Jovi and Aerosmith, and then there's like a metal movement of Slayer and Metallica. In case y'all don't know, I done watched Behind the Music. Jump up in the 1990s and the ballad rock is gone and all the electric guitar slides. And there's a group called Nirvana from Seattle that likes to wear holes in their clothes and their pants too big and not even cut their hair at all. Forget the shabby haircut. Don't even cut it at all. Come on. And here we are, halfway in the first decade of 2000, and this generation has its own sound. Yes, it does. If we start singing Hammer Time with parachute pants on, and nobody that was born today going to have a clue what's going on. If we say Billy Idol, they're going to say Billy who? Because what touched that generation does not touch this one. And the thing about it is the sound of that generation affected how everybody dressed. It affected how they communicated, the words they used. If you come up here and say something's jiving, I don't even know what, I think you're talking about what I put on my mashed potatoes or chives, whatever. Because the language is different. And when we're talking about inheritance and passing down generational blessings, we have to understand that our kids are not going to touch God on their sound. We're talking about inheritance, right? Inheritance. Why is sound important? I have a problem because I found most churches would rather keep their sound than share their stage with the new sound. So what happens is the next generation has no place to sing their song. So they go to the world and create their own stage, and then instead of dancing before God, they're dancing in the club. And then we have the nerve to stand up and condemn that generation from going to hell, when in reality we're the ones that wouldn't share the stage. I'm talking about inheritance and passing some things down. And that means there's some things you've got to let go. And there's some music I don't like. But guess what? If it will get somebody saved, I will sing it. There's some dress styles I don't particularly care for. You may not like my jeans in here today, but I wore them anyway. Because it makes me comfortable. And somewhere, somebody that don't own a suit could come in and say, well, the preacher's wearing jeans, I can too. Is anybody hearing me at all? And when we're talking about inheritance and something that's perpetual, something that's passed on from generation to generation to generation, we have to understand every decision we make does not just affect us, but it affects every generation behind us. And we can understand those things in the ecosystem. We can understand those things in the environment. We can understand those things in our own health, in our own body. But we get to church and want to make everything so super spiritual, when in reality we've got to realize every decision we make affects somebody behind us. The thing about the sounds of the generations is the 1960s built up on the 50s, and the 70s built up on the 60s, and the 80s built up on the 70s. Is anybody hearing where I'm going? Every generation built up on each other. It wasn't that they just invented music for the first time, because music's been around for thousands of years. But it was simply they found a new way to express it for the first time that connected with them and meant something to them. Anybody love that song, Our God is an Awesome God? Chances are that song touched you when you were the hungriest for God. And then you hear songs like I Am, and you think it's got too many words. Because you're just simple. God is an awesome God. There's nothing wrong with that. But it does become a problem when you just rather sing your song and not let anybody else sing their song. And we're talking about inheritance and transition and generational blessings, and we've got to understand, we've got to let every generation make its own sound. Can I leave you with that and let you go home?